It's the final frontier, as you know, Amy. We're talking about 2020, A Space Force Odyssey.
Spaceballs.
Uh,
I can't stop thinking of Mel Brooks's Spaceballs.
it's a classic, too. We've got a lot of drops to get through.
I know. I don't know if we have time.
I appreciate
We might have to bleed into Mike Gallagher's show.
Vice President Pence and Defense Secretary Mattis revisiting the United States Space Command, the projected sixth branch of the military.
Is that going to be their theme song, that Trekkie song you just played?
I think they'll have to buy the rights to that. I don't think they can just appropriate it.
Sixth branch of the military, wow.
You got to have fun with it because it is sort of...
Well, it's an eye-rolling concept. Like, oh, we really need this? But then if you think about the bigger picture, we want to get to space and claim the space before Russia and China, right?
We have been in space. Sheila
I'm
Jackson Lee.
No, I know.
Yeah. I could walk you through the history. Right.
I'm familiar.
Well, James Mattis, the Defense Secretary, General Mattis, he was a skeptic about this at first, but not yesterday. Here's what he had to say. He's not kidding around.
Space is one of our vital national interests in the sense of our use of space, our operations in space, and it is becoming a contested warfighting domain, and we have got to adapt to that reality. It's on par with the air, land, sea, and cyberspace domains in terms of it being contested, and it's now a domain in which we must be equally prepared as all of those other domains. It's no longer a new domain, it's a domain. And we've got to be able to compete, to deter, and to win.
Yeah.
Baseball.
So he's not joking around.
No.
He went on to take some questions from the audience, at which
good.
point he said this.
Having received all your letters over the years, and I've spoken to many of you, and some of you have traveled, hundreds of miles to be here, I'd just like to say, get a life, will you, people?
That's good.
For more on this topic, and we'll get to more of our drops.
Oh, yes,
because we're juvenile, but there's some serious matters related to this that apparently need to be discussed. So we brought a serious person on to do that. He is Colonel Cedric Leighton, CNN military analyst and security consultant who has served both on the Joint Chiefs of Staff as well as the National Security Council. Colonel Leighton, thanks for being with us again. Appreciate it.
Hey, you bet, Dan. Good morning.
Good morning. So did you retweet President Trump's tweet, Space Force all the way, exclamation point?
I did not this morning.
All right. What's your assessment of what was proposed yesterday in the request for $8 billion over the next 5 years to develop the United States Space Command?
So as far as the United States Space Command is concerned, that actually makes sense. And the reason for that is we actually had a United States Space Command that existed from 1985 to 2002. When it was disbanded, and most of the functions within that were placed in the already existing Air Force component, which was the Air Force Space Command, and which that continues to exist today. So that's different from actually having a separate space force. So what they're first going to do is they're going to have U.S. Space Command, which is a unified command, kind of like the European Command, Indo-Pacific Command, Special Operations Command, and then they will develop this somewhat incrementally into a Space Force, which will be a separate military service. That part is really not the necessary thing to do. What we really have to worry about is making sure that we continue to maintain what most people in the DoD and the President would call space dominance. And that's really the essential goal in this particular case.
Oh, is there really a race to get a space program going before Russia and China, or do they already have one?
They already have one, Amy, and the reason this becomes important is because back in 2007, the Chinese actually blew up one of their satellites, and they did that using another satellite that had a weapon on it that could actually destroy satellites. The Chinese were sending a signal that they have the capability to destroy satellites. So this time they did they destroyed a satellite that was an old weather satellite that was no longer functional. But the signal was pretty clear. They could destroy anything out there if they weren't prevented from doing so.
What are the other priorities, national security concerns? Satellites is an obvious one. building a Mar-a-Lago on the red planet. I get that. What else? What else should we be focused on, or what else is part of thinking about America's interest in space?
So besides the Mar-a-Lago on the red planet, what you're really looking at is common everyday things like GPS. GPS is based completely on space satellites being up there, providing us with directional information. And now it's become so common that we have that in our phones, in our cars. We use it for medical information, banking information. Basically, the entire internet is now dependent on space. So that's the primary concern, is that if we lost control of space, or our assets in space were damaged or taken out, then we would lose the kind of life that we have right now, and we would be reverting back to the 1940s or 1950s. That really is the primary concern, and it could have significant impact on everything from banking to agriculture, all of the things that we're looking at, including weather forecasting. Weather forecasting would no longer be as precise as it is, although we all complain about how imprecise weather forecasting is. It would be far worse if we didn't have the satellites that we use right now.
So will this diminish the role that the Air Force plays by any chance?
It will, absolutely. The Air Force has as one of its core missions space, and in fact, they call themselves America's Aerospace Force, and a substantial portion of what the Air Force actually does is the managing and controlling of satellites. They also monitor other people's satellites and other people's systems in space. So that particular aspect of it, and the fact that they support the intelligence agencies with that kind of expertise, that would go away, presumably, under not only the U.S. Space Command, but also the future U.S. Space Force. And that, is a roles and missions kind of question, as we call it in the military, and that could impact on our effectiveness and potentially add an extra layer of bureaucracy where we don't really need that.
So what form does the Space Force take? These are...
It's funny you saying.
Well, I mean, I think...
Because they're working on logos right now. You should see the choices.
Well, I'm thinking, Edward James Olmos on Battlestar Galactica is what I'm thinking.
I'm thinking of him every day of
I
my
know
life.
you do for different reasons. Is it gonna be drones? Are it gonna be AI operating spacecraft?
So, yeah, it could potentially be AI, artificial intelligence operating spacecraft. That is absolutely a possibility, but it would, presumably at least be controlled by people handling, the orbits of different space systems. That would be in U.S. Space Command and eventually in the Space Force. So those are the kinds of things that they could do. In essence, what we're looking at is, kind of like, I guess the easiest example would be the Navy, because they protect what we call our sea lanes of communication. In essence, all the different trading routes around the world are protected or monitored by the United States Navy. This would do the same thing for the space above our Earth, and that would be, a considerable mission area, to say the least.
Do you think there'll be love stories that develop in space, like George Clooney and Sandra Bullock in Gravity, something like that? Is that possible? It could happen.
It's probably already happened on the International Space Station, except we don't know about it yet. At least I don't know about it yet.
Little space station baby. All right, so the Army has its star. The Marines have a globe and anchor. What do you think the Space Force logo is going to look like?
Well, I'm thinking there's going to be something extraterrestrial about it. I'm not sure exactly what it will, if it will look something like what they're proposing as part of the president's reelection campaign, but it could, include, some type of, rocket ship lunging toward the heavens. I'm not sure exactly.
How about
I'm expecting.
How about like a lighted finger? E.T.
Well, that could be very symbolic. Going all the way back to the Renaissance. So it could be. There could be all kinds of possibilities there. I think it could keep a lot of imaginations going this morning.
Do you think we'll be able to find the home planet of the Green Party candidate in Ohio 12 who came from a distant planet to run for Congress? Is that a possibility?
Well, it's all things are possible, so I wouldn't discount that. But
Yeah, it is the final
when
frontier. Yeah, there's no question about it.
When you have these kinds of possibilities, there may be all kinds of planets will come up for all kinds of different home planets for all kinds of different people. So you never know exactly where they would be.
I mentioned you're a CNN military analyst. Who asks dumber questions, me or Don Lemon?
Dan.
I have a great time with both of you.
Yes, okay. All right, very good.
answer.
Very, very political. Colonel Cedric Leighton, he is a CNN military analyst, security consultant who has served us both on the Joint Chiefs of Staff as well as the National Security Council. Colonel Leighton, thanks for joining us again. Appreciate it.
You bet, Dan. See you later, Amy.
Bye. Thank you. And he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.